We get told to put compost on our gardens every single year. But this year, I'm not doing it. I'm out here getting ready to put my first plants in the ground for the 2025 garden. And I'm gonna be planting some onions in this bed. But what I need to do is get the soil prepped and ready for production. Things have just been sitting here over the winter, pretty stagnant. And what I wanna do is take the time in order to inoculate my soil with life and nutrients. That way, the second my plants get planted in the ground, they are ready to grow. And honestly, what I've done for every single year in the past is add a layer of compost to the top of my soil. And if you're just starting out a garden, this can be a really good thing, because the reasons why compost is so amazing is it helps to create soil structure with organic matter. It adds a ton of microbes, but it honestly adds a very trace set of vitamins and minerals and nutrients to your garden. So after a few years, or in my case, 6 years of applying compost to my soil, it really starts to lose a little bit of its magic. Not because compost is bad, but because my soil already has enough of it. It's already pretty amazing. It doesn't need better structure. What it needs is more life. So before I add anything to my soil, the first thing that I want to do is remove all of this mulch on top. Because if I just add more fertilizer or compost or whatever I'm adding to the top of my soil with the mulch applied, this mulch is going to absorb most of the nutrients, especially nitrogen, that you apply to help break down this mulch. What I'm doing is just taking it all, putting it in a 5-gallon bucket, and I'm going to save it once I'm done. When I talk about adding nutrients to the soil, what I'm mainly talking about are the 3 macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And 2 of these, nitrogen and phosphorus, are readily available in most soils, and you actually add quite a bit of it when you add compost. And the best part is they stick around for the long time. But this can also be bad, because nitrogen generally doesn't stick around very long at all. Nitrogen naturally exists in the air, and it actually requires the nitrogen cycle for it to end up in your soil. And that's why planting plants is so important, because some of them actually help to add nitrogen into the soil, which can be eaten by microorganisms and then used by your plants to grow nice and strong. Nitrogen is essential for all plant growth. Yes, so is phosphorus and potassium, but nitrogen is needed for almost every single cellular function that a plant has to perform. So we need to make sure that we're providing an ample amount of nitrogen at the right times for all of your plants to grow strong and healthy. But since compost is so phosphorus and potassium heavy and really light on nitrogen, it doesn't make a lot of sense to actually keep adding it year after year after year after year, because what you're going to get is an imbalance of phosphorus, nitrogen, and potassium across the board. And you're going to actually have to start adding in a lot more nitrogen, so that way your plants can actually absorb all of the macronutrients in the ratios that they need. And therein lies the problem. So what do we need to do in order to grow a luscious and prosperous garden? As I said, we need to add life. Life in the soil is what breaks down everything that we add to it and creates nutrients and energy that are available to the plant's roots to uptake and grow strong. So one of the best ways that we can do that, adding life, is by using worm castings. We're gonna put some worm poopy on here. Worm castings are amazing because they're pre-digested food. The worms have done all of the work for the plants, all of the work for the microorganisms in the soil. And not only are we going to be adding nutrients with worm castings, but we're going to be adding even more beneficial life to our soil, which is going to really kickstart our plants' growth. So instead of adding compost, which is usually a single source, it's not providing a lot of diversity of organic life. So what we want to do is use something like worm castings, which is eating a bunch of different organic things, which are going to create a lot of different micro organisms inside of this worm castings. And also, look how little that I'm actually having to apply to my soil to have such a significant effect. It doesn't take much. Whereas if I was adding compost, I'd have to add a good few inches in order to get anything really worthwhile. And now that we've just injected a ton of beneficial life into our soil, it's time to add some food. What I'm adding here is blood meal, which is a 12-0-0. So it's high nitrogen fertilizer. And the reason why I'm adding this is because, as I said before, it's going to help to balance out that nutrient complex. So that way it's a lot easier for my plants to absorb all of the nutrients that they need. And this right here, a cup and a half, is all that this garden bed is going to need to feed my plants for the first 1 to 2 months of this year. That's all that it takes. A little bit of worm castings, a little bit of nitrogen fertilizer, and we're off to the races. But we're gonna add one more thing. This last ingredient is what I believe sets my soil apart from anyone else. And this is what's actually adding all of the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that get absorbed by my plants. This is essentially a multivitamin for your soil. And once this all breaks down and gets absorbed by my plants, this is what I'm eating. This is why homegrown produce can be so much healthier and nutritious for you than whatever you're gonna get at the store. One, you're picking it right out of the garden, so none of the nutrients are going to decay. But when you're adding a multivitamin like this, which is called azomite, which is just a play on words, which means minerals from A to Z, you're ensuring that your plants get all of the nutrients that they absolutely need in order to grow the best that they possibly can. If you're gonna grow a garden, you might as well do it right. We're growing our garden to get the best food that we can get our hands on. And therefore, I want to put the best ingredients that I can get my hands on so I know exactly what I'm getting out of my garden. And now that we've got the soil prepped, it's time for planting. And normally, if you'd be adding compost or an inorganic fertilizer, you wouldn't be able to do that right now. Sometimes even your compost can be a little bit too hot for you to be able to plant immediately, meaning that when you get your compost, you actually have to check the temperature to see if it's still cooking. Because what you don't want to do is apply that compost to your garden beds. That compost isn't actually finished. You plant your plants in your compost, and then what happens? They die because the soil is actually too warm for any of your plants to grow. But with these finished organic ingredients, everything's cool, everything's pre-digested and ready for the plants. And now that our onions are planted, the only thing that we have left to do is add back the mulch. Well, 1 garden bed down and 13 more to go. But these simple steps is what's going to set my garden apart from anyone else. These steps are what's going to provide health and productivity to my garden. But just don't trust every single word that I say. Even though I'm promoting this information, all I'm doing is guiding you through the process that I'm taking. You should still take the time and the steps to understand what you're actually doing and the impacts that it's going to have on your garden. Because at the end of the day, it's your experience. All I can do is share what I have found successful in my garden in order to provide you the knowledge and the inspiration to have success as well. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you learned the importance of soil health and the impact it can have on your garden. I can't wait to see you next time.